Hi everyone, my name is Mia Christensen and this presentation looks at my research into children's understandings of sustainability related topics and issues. I work at the School of Early Childhood and Inclusive Education in the Faculty of Education at Queensland University of Technology, which is located in Brisbane, Australia. This research is part of my doctoral studies, which are nearing completion, and my supervisors are Dr. Lyndall O'Gorman and Professor Kerry-Ann Walsh. This presentation will look at the aim of my research, the background, the method, my preliminary findings, and preliminary implications and references for further review. The aim of my study was not to find a singular way that young children understand the phenomena of sustainability related topics and issues, but rather to explore and describe it in terms of differences that define the phenomenon from the perspective of a group of 6 to 8-year-old children. I interviewed a group of 17 6 to 8-year-old children, and I used a drawing-telling approach. So I used a drawing-telling approach because it helped me to establish rapport quickly with a group of children that I'd never met before. I used it because drawing is a familiar activity for children in this age group. It provides children with 2 channels of communication, a visual channel and a verbal channel, and it helps to avoid linguistic barriers. I asked the children the open-ended question, if you were the boss of the world, what choices would you make to help the world to become a better place for every living thing forever? Children were then given the option that they could respond to this question by doing a drawing, and then I asked the children about the drawing, or they could just respond by talking to me about their suggestions. Of the 17 participants, 8 decided to do a drawing and 9 chose not to do a drawing. Now, this question was informed by my research in my literature review, and as part of the research in my literature review, I explored the concept of sustainability. Now, sustainability is a complex concept because it is changing and evolving and continues to change and evolve. So I landed on the UNESCO 4-dimensional model of sustainability. Now, I acknowledge that there are other models of sustainability, such as the 3-dimensional model of sustainability, the nested models, the Venn diagram models, and I also acknowledge the criticisms associated with this model that they are human-centric. But nonetheless, this model proved to be an important pedagogical tool that helped to inform my study. So the 4-dimensional model of sustainability presented in the diagram has 4 dimensions: the natural, the economic, the social, and the political. And importantly, those dimensions are all interlocked and interrelated. So my study, I wanted to find out from children what their understandings were of sustainability that incorporated all 4 of these dimensions, and that's why I chose to use the open-ended question, if you were the boss of the world, to elicit responses from children in response to the broad concept of sustainability. In a trial research, in a pilot research program, I asked children if they'd heard of the term sustainability and what they thought it meant, and the responses that I got were very narrow and quite limited. I continued in this study, so the group of 17 children, I also asked them if they'd heard of the word sustainable or sustainability and if they knew what it meant. So of the 17 participants, 10 said yes, they had heard of the word, so 7 said no. And of the 10 that said that they had heard of the word, they gave responses when I asked what they thought it meant. They gave responses such as, its sustainability means to save the world, to pick up rubbish, to be caring, or that it might mean reusing. So the rest of the children who had heard of the word said that they didn't know what it meant. So that was really interesting and really important for my study because I wanted to hear their broad understandings. I wanted to provide children with a way to be able to share their understandings. So I wanted to be able to access their complex understandings around this complicated topic. So it was also informed by the background, so the current state of the planet reports by the WWF, which have shown not just in 2020 but over numerous years the urgent need for transformation for the way that we're living on the planet. It was also informed by the incredible amount of research about the fact that children are capable and competent and can engage in complex, multifaceted, multidimensional thinking, strategies and conversations. But again, my challenge was how to access this information, how to provide the children with a way to share these understandings. It was also informed by relevant policy and curriculum and documents. So this study was set in southeast Queensland in Australia. And in Australia, we have a national curriculum, the ACARA curriculum, and as part of the ACARA school curriculum, there are 3 cross-curricular priorities, one of which being sustainability. Now, all 17 participants in my study were at school, so either in prep, year 1, year 2, or year 3. So they had all been exposed to this sustainability cross-curricular priority. The other important point that informed my study was the missing voices of the group of 6 to 8-year-old children in relation to their understandings of sustainability. This was highlighted by Davis in 2009, reiterated by Somerville and Green in 2015, and Ardone and Bowers in 2020, in June 2020, completed a systematic literature review of early childhood environmental education at a global level. And while they did find an increase in research in between 2013 and 2018, they still highlight the dearth of research, particularly in the age group 7 to 8-year-old children. Now, in my research of the 17 children, 14 of them are between 7 and 8 years of age. So that's where my research stands to make a significant contribution. So I used phenomenography as my methodology. So phenomenography explores how people experience, understand, and ascribe meaning to a specific situation or phenomenon, in this case, sustainability-related topics and issues. But it explores more than just the understanding. We're looking for the similarities and the differences that arise, so the variation. And I used in particular discursive phenomenography, which explores the variation as the primary aim of the research. So my research design, as I said earlier, I used a drawing-telling approach because it's a common activity. Children enjoy drawing, avoids linguistic barriers, and they often feel empowered as a result of being involved. Now, as I highlighted earlier, I did a lot of research as part of the literature review into sustainability and the evolution of early childhood education for sustainability, and particularly around the 4-dimensional model of sustainability. As I used phenomenography, it was very important that I bracketed this information because the outcome space that developed as part of this research needed to develop in an iterative manner, and it took 10 cycles of iteration to come up with my categories of description and my outcome space. So I used interview with open-ended question as part of my conversations. I then transcribed all of the data myself to become intimately involved with the data. Then I moved to the compilation phase, where instead of looking at individual pieces of data, I then needed to look at the group and see what themes started to emerge. And the overriding theme that emerged was the sense of action and the actions that children were describing to address sustainability related topics and issues. I then analysed the data, looking at the similarities and differences, and this then led to the categories of description that became apparent. So these are my categories of description. So these are my preliminary findings. So my research evolved and came up with 6 hierarchical categories of description. So increasing in complexity from category A through to category F. So category A looks at providing for, where providing for the material wants and basic needs of living things was the focal point for children, and decision making was unconnected to the ecosystem. Category B was regulating others, where children's focus was on authoritative decision making and protecting the basic needs of living things simultaneously. Category C looked at educating to empower, where children adapted their own behaviours to empower others, informed decision making around the basic needs of living things. Now, category D is where we see a really significant shift, so helping to empathise, where children focused on considerate decision-making on a diverse, connected view of living things. So for the first time, we see children describing being part of the ecosystem and not separate to the ecosystem. And we see this then through categories E and F. So category E, innovative to problem solve, where children were focused on futures orientated decision making based on a diverse connected view of living things. So where they could see connections with the non-human world. So where they were positioning themselves as part of the ecosystem and not separate to the ecosystem. And category F, connecting to systems, where children were focused on holistic decision making based on a globally connected ecosystem view of living things. So here is an example of a drawing and a telling. So in response to my open-ended question, what would you do if you were the boss of the world? And this is one of the first category in my categories of description. So this is the providing category, and the child has said, I would feed the animals if they didn't have so much food at home. That is a picture of me watering the plants. So I've said, so why do they need the water for? To make them grow. So we can see here they've identified what the issue is, and then they've used knowledge to provide a solution to that problem. Now, as we move through the categories of description to the more complex categories of description, so the connecting category is the second highest category of description in terms of complexity. So we can see here participant 1, in response to the question, is talking about, I will send scuba divers to check the seas to see if there's any rubbish, and if there is, they should collect it and put it into a special bag so that it doesn't hurt anyone. And you can read the next section. But what we see here in terms of the dimensions of variation, we see it's futures focused. It discusses global ramifications, and you can really see they've used really complex thinking here. So they have used identification, knowledge, comprehension, application, reflection, and also evaluation in terms of the actions that they are suggesting. So what are the implications? That young children are competent and capable research participants whose understandings reflect complex and multi-dimensional thinking related to sustainability. For young children to participate in addressing their concerns and interests, we need to listen to their voices in authentic ways. To capture their voices, we need to think carefully about the ways that we can provide young children with access to complex concepts such as sustainability. And we need to facilitate children's thinking and learning with the non-human world and move away from the human-centric pedagogical approaches which tend to dominate currently early childhood education for sustainability. And finally, my reference lists. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to send me an email. Thank you.